je vais continuer en anglais. Yeah, so this is a kind of a new project that I'm presenting today. I'm quite excited to get some first comments. So yeah, if you have any comments, this is the right time to have a big influence on the paper. So the paper today is Farmland Consolidation. The title, A Natural Experiment from France. As you see, the title is a bit different from what was advertised, which is just a sign that indeed it's a work in progress. Yeah. So why why is this interesting? What am I interested in? So if you look at what happened after World War II, we see a kind of an arrival of new techniques, tools, typically modern machines for farming. And I mean, the typical example that's often taken is these big combine harvesters. That's these big machines that can actually drive pretty quickly and do a big amount of work in the fields. So these machines became available, and the problem is that the organization of fields of farming or agricultural fields at the time was extremely fragmented. So basically, a farmer would have a piece of field on one side, and a bit further out, further on the other side, another piece of field, maybe a third one somewhere else, and this made that the farmer could actually have a substantial amount of land, but this would be very just very fragmented, very located at different part of the municipality. And the problem with this fragmentation is that this is badly suited for modern machines or like modern tools, and that became available. So to be able to answer that, or to use these modern machines and kind of try to get the benefits that they're promising in terms of productivity, what we had is that what happens that in many countries, and as the case here for the case of France, countries engage in farmland consolidation reforms. So the idea is that you would take some a given farmer would have 5 acres somewhere, 5 acres somewhere else, and you would have kind of a trade of farmland across farmers in the area, such that the farmer would end up with 10 acres of farmland that would be continuous, and then you could use these modern machines and these modern techniques. As I'm presenting it now, it seems like a zero-sum game. It in practice, there was no special target there. We will see that this was not a zero-sum game, overall. But yeah, the idea is that farmers would trade off parcels of land and to create continuous fields to be able to use modern machines. And this is where we arrive now. So some years after these processes, and we try to understand what are the long-term effects or the impact of these reforms on agricultural production. So the set of tools, techniques, productivity, and methods that we have in agriculture, kind of the narrow effect, if you want. But also, I think I want to look at kind of bit broader, kind of wider economic effects in these areas. I also, because it seems kind of relevant in a lot of discussions nowadays, I also want to look at the environmental impacts that these reforms have had. That being said, basically due to data limitations back in time, I think that the general point that can be made on production and on economic activity is a bit stronger than on the environment. That being said, I think it's still informative, so I will also talk a little bit about this. So just to fix ideas, what is farmland consolidation? The idea, as I said, it's really to trade off parcels of land, of farmland, to create bigger contiguous fields. So here I'm showing you a little kind of example. Just I use the GeoPortal from the IGN in France. So this is an aerial photo that was taken in 1949, and what you see is that you see a lot of fairly small fields. Fast forward 2016, same area, and the fields are much more much larger, much bigger sized fields. That's fundamentally what I'm looking at in this paper. So what I do, so I study the economic and agricultural effects of farmland consolidation. To identify the effects, I will start by sort of the first or main analysis. I exploit a sharp geological shift in the soil composition in France. I will show you some maps in a second, to basically be able to capture the effect of consolidation in a spatial RDD framework. I want to highlight here that one of the drawback of using a kind of a geological border or something that's time invariant, very stable in the long run, is that you might have many things that have evolved over centuries due to the soil composition. And so this is why the outcomes that we look at are really, I will look at growth. So basically take a data point before the reform and data point afterwards, and then look at this different in growth around that border in a spatial RD framework. I conduct, as it's in RDD, I conduct a set of extensive validity tests using historical and time invariant local data. As hopefully you will agree with me that these are pretty convincing and kind of support the general approach. What I find on these kind of three big blocks. So first, in terms of kind of on the farming or agricultural side, you have large gains in productivity per worker. Farms became larger. So this was not a zero-sum game. So some farmers extended the amount of farms that they had, and some probably exceeded the market. So this is on the kind of on the productivity on the pure farming side. I also find that the kind of the typical family farm model that was kind of traditionally used seems to be declining. So we have less of this type of organization of farms and a bit more of a professional type of organization. That's kind of first set of results. Second set of results on economic activity. So local population, local employment, local income is growing in the places that have been more intensively consolidated. So generally good kind of on a local economic outcomes. So good positive effects of consolidation, and at the same time, kind of this is not a kind of a free lunch. There is some adverse effect on biodiversity and water quality. As I said, this third set of results, because there's a lack of kind of historical data, or I'm not aware of available historical data. It's not possible to have this growth effects with simply looking at the data today and see strong effects, but indeed there is the kind of possible confounding factors. And in general, the results are so I also basically run the same analysis with the same outcome, but using the staggered difference in difference approach. So this is the Duchesne-Martin and Dautefeuille type of approach, and the results are pretty confirmed. So it goes really in the same direction. To outline for the rest of the talk, I will talk a bit of background data, the empirical strategy, and of course the results. So the background. I will look at France. So this is I'm exploiting a special setting in France. What we see, but on this, France doesn't really stand out in the sense that it's pre World War II. There is not much farmland consolidation. There's a few examples, but it really started after World War II. And so you see a large increase. So here I'm plotting you just a histogram of the number of municipalities that got consolidated over time. By 2010, so at the end of the data set, we have about 15,500 municipalities, or about 45% of all municipalities in France that have been consolidated. Given that among the remaining municipalities, a lot of these are urban or maybe in some non-typical agricultural areas. That means that a large share of municipalities have been consolidated. Of typical agricultural municipalities have actually been consolidated. The way this works, so it generally, kind of going quickly, but typically it's a two-step process for the consolidation. The first step is that you would update the rural cadastre. So they measured back the all pieces of land that you would have in a given municipality. So I'm just showing you one of these examples that I found. So this is for the municipality of Annay-sur-Marne. Just one example where the the map was pretty clear. And then, you know, once this is done, then you would move to the second part, which is just kind of the trading of these parcels across farmers. So the actual consolidation part. Now moving to the part, kind of the part that is the useful for, like, key for the identification. So what I want to look at is the intensity of farm consolidation. You know, how this varies in space, and especially as a function of soil composition. So the interesting thing, so the pattern that I discovered when looking at this consolidation data, is that there is this kind of the border between kind of this greater Paris basin, which is, you know, all this very fertile historical soil, and the beginning of the massif. So this is this kind of brownish border that you see here. There's a Seuil du Poitou, which is kind of a little gap here, and then the same thing for the Massif Central and Central Massif in the south. And then you really see kind of a quite sharp change in soil composition. Quickly, one thing I want to say is that clearly on the one end you have the kind of the basin, and the other side you have a massif. So, you know, typically that you would think that maybe you know, you have a sharp change in altitude, which could also be a confounding factor. The thing that so we're looking at very sharp, a kind of very narrow bandwidth. I can show you the regressions. You don't, you know, narrow bandwidth, you don't actually see the evolution is smooth enough that you don't see any effect in terms of altitude around this kind of this border. When you bring this into so these just two coordinate systems, which is why the right hand side is a bit squished, but basically you place that border. So this is just the tracing of that dark brown versus non-dark brown line. I continued on the Seuil du Poitou based on the just a straight line, but of course this is not, it's a bit of a special case, which I can use then for a kind of placebo and robustness tests. Exactly, and the idea here is I'm going to compare the set of municipalities here to the municipalities on the other side, very narrow from the bandwidth, and try to see whether this had an impact on to first whether consolidation really changed at that level, and then on a set of outcomes. So the data that I'm going to use, so I'm using a municipal level land consolidation data. So this is a new data set that was produced by a few agro guys from France, which is an amazing data set. So I think it's huge work that they did. All the references are in the paper. I can provide them if anyone is interested. And so, you know, the key thing that is interesting is that this data set will include the area that was consolidated in the municipality, which is important, and the year of consolidation, which is the other variables I'm also using. And there's a second thing that I want to highlight is that there's a French agricultural survey from 1852, which is very nice to run kind of historical balance tests. So to have close to the border some, you know, to try to see whether locally the organization of agricultural production was different basically 100 years before the start of these reforms. The little footnote is that these are not municipal level data. The rest is municipal level or lower data. This is level at the canton, the historical canton level, so it's a bit more aggregated, but yeah, it's still pretty fine-grained. So I think that's very, very interesting. Then I use, I think, other sets of data that you're all quite pretty familiar with, so population count, workplace employment, you know, from censuses back as far as I can go. Interesting to go. And the same thing for historical agricultural censuses, so back from 1970. So this is quickly the data that I'm using. Just checking how I'm doing on time. Perfect. So the empirical strategy, as I said, I will estimate kind of a spatial RDD framework. So this is maybe the first key, the main analysis. As you know, I really want to highlight, and as I did in the intro, that I'm using the growth as the outcome. You could use the level, it works in the same way with the levels, but I think the argument for the growth is, or the point is much stronger using growth as outcomes. So this will be for the special RDD. There's two sets where I can't do that. So for local income, the data doesn't go back in time enough. So it's just contemporary data, and also for all the environmental outcomes. But for the rest, I can use growth as an outcome. So this is the first analysis. The second analysis, I'm going to do a basic difference in difference, staggered difference in difference, to a fixed effect estimator. To basically validate this analysis. And of course, the idea is that, so the interesting thing is that these two approaches don't rely on the same set of assumptions, and which if they go in the same line, that's kind of comforting towards the general robustness or the veracity of the point that I'm trying to make. So the spatial RD design, I think this is very standard. So you have the running variable, which is going to be distance to the soil border, two zones, A plus and A minus. A plus the treatment zone, so this is high intensity, so the Paris basin, if you want, and then the control low intensity area. And the idea is that as you get, we're going to compare municipality closer to closer, and as you get closer to the border, the idea is that the comparability of the two groups increases, and then when we are really at the border, we can have a kind of a proper, nice treatment and control type of design. As I said, the outcome is the growth, so delta y. We could use just the outcome, but yeah, the point is a bit stronger with growth. I want to show you a few validity tests to kind of to support this approach. So the first one is that indeed, I show you these two maps around the soil border, and the first question is, okay, do we actually see at that soil border where you go from silty soils to this more massive area, do we see a jump in, do we see a kind of discontinuity in consolidation? And indeed we see it. So here what I'm plotting, so we have the horizontal axis is the typical distance to the cutoff, treatment is positive distances, control negative distances. And what you have here on the vertical axis, this is the share of the consolidated land in the total municipal area. So X number of acres of land were consolidated. This over the total area of the acres of the municipality. And what you see is that you have kind of a plateau below, and you see a jump of about 0.1. So that's kind of the share goes from 0.1 to 0.2. So from 10% to 20% of the area that was consolidated. So pretty sharp, pretty clean jump that is observed around the border. So I think kind of the basic idea. Yes, it seems that this soil composition has an effect on farmland consolidation. You see a jump there. So that's the first thing. The second type of validity, which I think are very important to do, so is just one is to see, because the soil composition is something that is pretty sharp, but it's important to make sure that the border is really where we think it's located. So this is what you have in the first one, in panel A. Here, what I'm showing in panel A, it's basically this discontinuity, but assuming here that the border is placed where it is placed, so just previous graph, and then when I placebo move the border by 5, 7, 15, and 30 kilometers, on either side of the kind of on the north, east, southwest kind of move. And indeed, what we see is that there is no jump anywhere when on this placebo. The only jump, significant and large jump, happens at the soil border. So that's kind of a first reassuring point. Second one is just to make sure that the bandwidth doesn't seem to have an effect on the outcome. And indeed, so the optimal bandwidth following the Calonico et al. Approach. So this is here, and what you see is that the effect doesn't seem to change very much. What you take, 50%, half of the bandwidth or twice the bandwidth, it seems to have relatively minor effects. So that's also pretty reassuring. Now, the more difficult, but I think that's I think it's a nice selling point here of the paper, is that I run two general sets of balancing tests, and I'm showing you one here, and the second one is a large table which just doesn't fit much in the slides. And so two types of analysis. The first one is what I'm showing you here in table 1, is the comparing agricultural outcomes from the survey in 1852. So about 100 years before these reforms. And the idea here is that the concern that I have is that you have, on the one end, you have the both and kind of this kind of pretty productive areas, and it could be that on the long run, these things have had a long-term effect on just the socio-economic organization of these areas, and that affects just agricultural productivity traditions are just different due to soil composition over centuries, and that might be a confounding factor. So this is not, per se, it's not consolidation that drives the result that I will show you in a bit, but it will be something else. So what I find quite interesting.
Can I ask a question just before that?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah. The frontier is geological, right? In nature. So it probably does not correspond perfectly with the administrative cutoffs. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with that, especially at the canton level, right? Which is slightly bigger, I guess. So how do you allocate a canton either on one side or the other of the border?
So there, basically, what I do is that if you have the cantons that are not being crossed by the border, that's clear there on either side. For the cantons that are on the border, I basically compare the area that is let's say that you have 60% of the municipality that is on one side and 40% on the other side. I will assign that canton to the 60% side. I can do this. So this is what's done here. You could do the same thing where you exclude those at the border, but of course, and this also works. But of course, it just, since the cantons are larger, you suddenly compare a bit further out municipalities. So that's a bit the two approaches.
Okay, I mean, so not that when you do that, you generate noise, right? Measurement error in the treatment variable. So there is an automatic attenuation bias, right? So you are favoring your placebos, right?
Yeah.
And actually, it probably would be interesting to run that on commune level data. So I was surprised that you didn't use the 55 census, agricultural census. So we have it.
From which year? 1855?
1955. In 1955, a lot of the consolidation did not take place, had not taken place. So you would have to think exactly how to do that. But you for sure have a much, especially on this, like very far away from the center of the Paris Basin, a lot of the land consolidation would not have taken place yet. So probably at the threshold of your frontier, you still have zero treatment effect in terms of zero first stage.
First stage,
at least very small. So that would be also an interesting placebo to run, more closer to the bulk of what is happening.
No, but this would be so I only had found the censuses back to 1970. But if the 55 is available, I'd be very, of course.
Yeah, we actually it's not, but we digitized this, so now it's available. But
so now it's available. Okay.
I mean,
then
I can lend it to you in some sense.
That would be amazing. Yeah, no, indeed, this would be. I mean, I think this analysis is still interesting for this from the long-term perspective. Make sure there's no anticipation and this type of. But I granted the municipal level data would provide a better kind of a more precise point. And then so this is the first set of balancing tests. Then I run a second test of balancing tests. So this is at the municipal level data at the municipal level, and so I look at historical population basically until 1936. So every census from 1876, there's no gap at that moment in historical population. Same thing, I look at municipal area, the presence of a river flowing through the municipality, the average elevation, the historical spatial organization. So this is the Cassini maps that have been digitized, and everything is smooth on that side. That being said, I want to highlight. So these are very reassuring, but since I'm using growth as the outcome at the municipal level, they're not per se required. It's nice that it works, but they're not per se required.
And farmland is farmland area, right? It's in hectares.
It's farmland area, yes, exactly. Yeah, it's farmland area. Yeah.
Could you look also as well at farmland as a share of the total area?
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you have forest? Well, it probably is very similar. But if you have percent of forest area, that would be included. Cool.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So no, actually, so this census is actually very extensive. So I took those that sets a few variables. The one that I was really happy to have is one is the daily income. There might be some link between income and productivity. So I think that's a nice one to have. And also some type of machine, availability of machines. So this is very early, not it's far from the combine harvesters that we're using nowadays, but it's still interesting to see that there's not like large investment differences around this at the local level. And this, of course, all density. So farm plow and threshing machines. Okay, so this is basically the validity test for the RDD. And then, as I said, trying to validate these results, I also approach this in a very different way. The concern, if you want, from the problem with that one might have with the RDD is that by definition I can never exhaust the full list of variables that I would like to have to validate completely the RD framework, and as such it's interesting to have a different approach relying on the kind of parallel trend in this type of idea. So very standard approach. I'm using the estimator from de Chesmartin and Dotfeuille 2020. So to go to the results.
If you use de Chesmartin Dotfeuille, does that mean that you're focusing on the very first period just after the treatment? Because I think de Chesmartin Dotfeuille just look at the change, right, in just around the date of consolidation.
Exactly, but with census years as year points.
Oh, so yeah, so very wide.
So actually fairly wide, exactly, in terms of it's periods in exactly of time is the census years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that it seems more the long-term effect are probably a bit more interesting or
yeah, but I mean doing Sun and Abraham on that would be fine as well.
Would be fine, exactly. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I didn't run it. But it would be interesting to have robustness. Yeah. So I do look at three groups of outcomes. So this is just to organize thoughts a little bit. So the first effects on farming and agricultural productivity. That's the first set. Second set of outcomes, kind of wider economic effects. And third point is kind of long-term environmental impacts. So I will just go now kind of sequentially through these different outcomes. So first one, looking at productivity growth. So kind of this is tons per agricultural full-time employment of production, and you see indeed that there's a jump in production. So pretty large when you look at this in kind of in growth, and when you look at this, kind of this event study graph type of representation, you also see kind of an evolution. So this is what I meant with this period of kind of census years. So -2, -1, 0, 0. This is the moment, the closest point census to the consolidation. And then you see an increase in production. So it's kind of the production per worker has increased. So this is the kind of maybe opening forcing an open door, but this is the promised gains for agricultural productivity, and indeed that seems to be validated. So that's already kind of good to have retrospectively. Yeah.
It's so. Should I interpret the treatment effects graph from the left in tons per hectare or something like that?
It's ton per full-time employment per worker in normalized
ton per worker.
It's ton per worker, yeah.
Okay,
but here, so this is the growth. So there's a gap in the growth, so very significant.
Because I would love to see that per hectare as well, probably.
So I actually run that one also. I don't have it here, but I run it too, and you also see a discontinuity.
Yeah, just to have like an idea of the magnitude.
Mm-hmm. You mean the number of, so
yes, how big is it, right? Just to think about the size of the stuff.
So here it seems to be about 60 tons per year.
Yes, but for an average farm of, let's say, 40 acres or 40 hectares, 30, it's hard to say, right?
But per worker, indeed, the farm size would also be, but that can be, I can add that. Yeah.
That would be helpful to interpret results, yes.
Okay. But this idea of having 60, an effect of 60 tons per full-time employment worker, that seems reasonable, or your question was?
Yeah, that was my question. Yes, basically, is it like huge compared to the average evolution of that over 60 years, right? In France, in the control group, let's say.
I need to plot the average. It seems it's based on the growth of the right hand side. It's pretty it's about like an 80% gap.
It seems a lot. Seems huge. That's my thinking.
Okay. So that's for agricultural productivity. Then moving to farm size. So there the gap is about a 25 percentage points. So the growth on the right hand side was 25 percentage point larger, and this seems to represent about 10 acres more on the long run for per farm.
So this one we ran with Jacinth Enrich in his PhD thesis, because I have like a completing paper 2 years. So I was trying to look at which things we did similarly. So we did this one, and something that seemed to be happening in the data when we look at it like very finely is that we fail to find parallel trends for groups that are too far apart in terms of the date at which they enter the treatment. That is, the guys that enter very early, they are, of course, much larger farms, but their trends are much steeper in terms of increase of farm size and log farm size than the guys who enter very late or who never enter. Never enter are completely not good as controls. And what we ended up doing was comparing very close groups, so groups that like consolidate like one census apart, let's say, and there the results are pretty dispiriting. Like in a sense, we don't see much in the very early like one census distance stuff, but then parallel trends are very fine. So in a sense, with this project, I've always felt it was hard to defend a lot the parallel trend assumptions when you look at it very, very closely. So I would be interested to see, it would be interesting to see whether if you start like separating the different groups and looking at the parallel trend for each group, how they look. And here having
based
the 55,
based on the entrance.
Yes, and having the 55 census here helps a lot, because in a sense it gives you a baseline where you have a lot of non-treated yet. And for that, like we really had a lot of difficulty finding long run, good long run counterfactuals, because people that relocate early, they are very, very different. And that's also right something that could be driving in a little sense, in a sense, your also results for the discontinuity. We did not try this one. We tried. It's very clever. We were not as clever as you were, but we tried like something spatial with using canton fixed effects, for example. We never managed to get rid of a confounding bias with that. But one thing that could happen, right, is that if you go look at 1876, it's very far in the past. The structural transformation did not start or did not reach the confines of the Paris Basin yet. Probably more accurate to say that. And so like these around the frontier things are very similar. But then when you start consolidation, probably in the interwar period or just after the war, when you start the structural transformation, these two areas probably are on different paths, even in terms of growth. And that might, put the parallel trend period at a difficulty. And so that's why I think the 55 stuff is very important.
I think so. I agree that the 55 one is definitely useful. It would really be great. I mean, that's absolutely true. Then the one thing that, but I have to dig into this. But I'm curious to see, when looking close to that border, how the entrance into consolidation, how this evolved because clearly distance to going to Paris or like to the main, that you see a clear pattern. But when it goes narrow enough, I'm curious to see whether there is a something there, which would, if not, that would support this analysis.
I see your point, but in a sense, there remains something hard to defend in your approach, right? If you write a structural model of the structural transformation, you will find that land quality, right, is going to play a very important role, and land quality will probably, right, differential land quality would probably put the areas into different paths. That's what I'm worried about, right, in your approach for now, like that. I would expect these two areas to start in different paths. That's again, like that's why probably we can separate our explanations using early data.
Yeah, I mean, so the interaction. So these two are I mean, the tests that are making this validity test in the beginning, they're still pretty convincing in the sense that close to the border, we're talking about fairly similar. I mean, density is the same, economic activity is the same, elevation is very, very similar. Historical, granted, is the canton, and we'd like to go at a lower level, but we're talking about pretty similar areas. So whether the interaction of, if your question is the interaction of land consolidation and land quality, that is a good point. Whether, but I'm less sure about.
No, that's not my point. My point is to say, probably you would expect places with high land quality to undergo different structural transformation than places with lower land quality. That's just what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that only to kick in when the structural transformation reaches the region. And for that, for me, for now, I'm not seeing enough of this difference of your placebo checks being exactly when the structural transformation reaches the region. It's hard because, of course, when the structural transformation reaches the region, at the same time, you want to do land consolidation, right? So these things happen very closely in time.
Yes, and in a sense, this is the reaping the benefits of the land is only possible from land after land consolidation. So in a way, it's a mechanism story.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be, right? So that's the key question. That's the key question that I have with this land consolidation program, is that it could be, right, that so it could be that the market, especially the land market or the land rental market, would be able to reallocate land to the most effective uses, right? And so you don't need this land consolidation to really accelerate things or to really get things started. And it could be that this consolidation happened for other reasons at the same time, or for like have a small increase on some productivity. And the two things happen to be like happening at the same place at the same time without one causing the other. So there is a key confounding thing here, that is the process of structural transformation that's going on in the background, but is differential depending on land quality. And that is hard to pin down. Okay. Up to now, with our project with Jacine, my belief was that land consolidation basically had a zero effect. So I'm very happy and interested in your results, but I'm also extremely demanding because basically my mind was almost made up.
Then I'll try to continue, and but it's yeah, I mean I see your concerns. I try to address them. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, and then I'll just continue a little further. Just, but thank you very much. Yeah, there's another point that I thought was interesting to mention, because that seems to be also a part of the interesting stories when you look at the share of spouses in total farm employment. So the data doesn't specify the gender of the spouse, but I mean, I think from general historical perspective, the spouse was often the woman in the couple, and what you see is that you have a decline in the spouse employment in total farm employment. So there is this kind of, I interpret this as this kind of evidence that you see a bit of a decline in this family farm model, where you have the couple that works on the farm and shift towards something more professional and less family run type of effect, which I think is also quite interesting. Now moving a little bit to the effect on population. So there, what you have is population growth and population density. So here, the effect are also pretty large. You see large population growth at the local levels around the border, and same thing. So here you will see that I use a little bit of a longer period because just the census of population dates goes a bit longer. So I have a few more data points, which, given if the 1955 agricultural census is available, I can also reproduce that in the other one. But so that's, I just go a little bit more in that case. And we see an increase of residential density. So this is people at the residential location. I don't talk about where they work. And you see an increase with pretty flat effect in the beginning, and an increase afterwards. When you look at employment, you find a similar effect. The pattern is a bit less. It's a bit more noisy. So typically here, in the 3 periods later, you start, the effect's not perfectly, it's a bit less well observed, but I think there's a pattern that is clearly appearing there. The interesting thing is that to kind of explain this employment effects, so I was trying to dig to try to understand which sectors seem to have benefited. Maybe there's some heterogeneity that happened, and that has played a role in these kind of in the noise that we see in employment relative to population. So this is what you see here. So this is the special RD framework, looking at for employment growth in agriculture, manufacturing, and services. For each case, you have one. The first one doesn't include covariates. The other one includes covariates, but yeah, that doesn't seem to have a major effect. Exactly. And the interesting thing, is that the agricultural worker, there doesn't seem to be a significant growth in agricultural employment around the border, which is different from manufacturing and services. The way, but this is what I'm mentioning here. I'm testing for this at the moment. I was hoping to have the results, but takes a bit more time than expected. But what I'm curious about is try to understand whether these manufacturing and services are somehow agricultural related type of production, typically machine productions or maintenance of, which are basically agricultural worker, but just that are now manufacturing or classified manufacturing or services. So I'm curious about this. But what I observe is that the employment growth following consolidation seems to actually happen from manufacturing and services. There is one explanation is possibly this. The second explanation is actually, if we move, I'll come back to income in a second. The second explanation
just before that, can we just
absolutely
look at this data? So these data are from the population census or the
so this is the employment, the INSEE employment at the employment location, exactly. Yeah.
So its employment location is
how is 1968.
You have the commune of the worker in this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. One thing you could do maybe would be to combine the RD design with the timing, right? So you could look at what happens in 68, what happens in each year, especially looking at the guys that are going to consolidate in the future. So to do a placebo check again, right? And that will probably cut into my argument, right? Into my concern. So I would be very, very interested into seeing these ones, because in 68, you still have a pretty decent amount of consolidation to take place in the future.
Yeah. So that's, but would you expect heterogeneous pattern between the different sectors? Or,
no, to me, it would be a nice test of whether before you see no discontinuity, right? Before the precise date of consolidation, and whether discontinuity starts to grow up after consolidation. So that would be a really confirmation that the causality is really tightly linked to the temporality. Right? Because otherwise, it might be the case that you start seeing opening ups before, in which case it would be my story of like this thing just coming at the same time as right, as a general process. Yes, exactly. Transformation of the economy. And the second thing that is a little bit weird with this result is that why would you see that employment increases in the two sectors without having a decrease in agriculture? Whereas like that's the process of structural transformation that we expect. Like you make a mechanization of agriculture easier, you increase farm, so land per worker, and then these workers that are released from agricultural production are moved into manufacturing and services. So it's a little bit weird to not see a negative coefficient.
No, but it's
a little bit late also. 68 probably a little late.
But I'm also very interested in that you're asking this question, and I'm so happy that you're asking this question, because this is one of the things where you know the global structural transformation doesn't have to be observed locally everywhere, and I'm actually curious about this and whether there is some interesting pattern in that dimension. So I'm even to the, but I'm just waiting the cost and benefit, but I would really like to have something a little bit more structural on this to try to understand.
So it does make what you're saying is very consistent, but at the same time, right? Your treatment basically affects agriculture. So it's a little, right? We would expect it to kickstart the process from agriculture to manufacturing. And so here, if you're interested in structural approach to that, like the Jacinth Enrich's job market paper was basically on that. And as a second piece of evidence of what built the belief that I have that mostly structural transformation would have happened without the land consolidation program, is that what he finds with the structural model is basically it's a big pull that happened, not a big push. Most of what is happening is due to manufacturing attracting workers, to increases in manufacturing productivity, and then agriculture just adapts by increasing capital to respond to an increasing marginal productivity of labor. So to me, that's a story that makes sense. That was also identified in the US in other countries, but like your results like shed a different light on that and are very interesting and provocative. So I welcome them a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the part of the story would also, this is also what I'm trying to test this thing with manufacturing, is that I'm curious about how manufacturing and service, how related are they to agriculture. In a sense, it's did they shift? It's like building and maintenance of machines for agriculture. Basically, you're still working in agriculture in your municipality, but you've now been listed as manufacturing. And then, if this is the case, you would have, kind of an agricultural growth of product of employment. But just it's kind of a label. There's a bit of a labeling story. But I think this is what I'm looking at, kind of more contemporary data, and try to see whether there is something like this that can be observed, and let the data speak on that one. Okay, so maybe just I come back with on yeah, no, exactly. Sorry. So just to continue, one other thing that I said is that it also seems that this trend that I observe in like share of spouses in farm employment, it's not an effect that the farm became more professional and and typically women stayed at home. But indeed, you see women's labor force participation that is increasing following the reform. So it might also be driving part of this kind of shift of labor towards manufacturing and services, which is a shift from kind of family farm type of structure to something else. So that's another possibility. I think they're not mutually exclusive, but that's something that might also be happening. A last point on this wider economic effects that I wanted to mention. So this is not growth. This is, I'm looking at the données Carroyer, so that the 200 square meter income, and which income per capita in a fraction of poor households. So this is not growth based, but around the border. And what I observe is that there is indeed a kind of a jump to the side more consolidated as an income in euro per capita that is larger. It's fairly small in the effect in income on euro per capita is relatively small relative to the mean of below, but there's a significant effect. And same thing, the fraction of poor household, there's also a kind of less poor households on the side that was more treated, more consolidated. So they seem to be also something, all this benefiting, these effects in population employment seem also to be related to so to the kind of to benefits in income and lower fraction of poor households. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is because I was talking about this with a few colleagues at a kind of more kind of natural and agro department, and they were also very interesting to. They suggested I also look at this. That would be very interesting. So I'm happy to kind of oblige. So what I'm trying to do here is really just to look a little bit at kind of environmental impacts. The key drawback of this is that by definition, or not by definition, but the data availability is a bit is not great when going back in time. So for a lot of these moments, I can only do kind of cross-sectional analysis, and so yeah, that's what I do with, hoping that the validity tests that I did above are kind of supporting enough of this, but I'm not sure I can claim causality for these things. So the first one, which is pretty mechanical, but one shouldn't underestimate it, is just the edge row density. Consolidation, one of the kind of direct basic impacts is just you take edge rows and to make bigger contiguous areas. And this has a pretty large impact on biodiversity. So it seems, so that's my understanding, that edge rows have basically three main benefits from a kind of a biodiverse or environmental or benefits. So one, there's a cooling effect in hot summers for both possibly crops and farm animals. They also mitigate soil erosion, which is not a trivial effect, and they also participate in hosting a kind of a wide variety of species, of wildlife species. So this is in a sense also kind of a moment of biodiversity. And indeed, what you see both when looking at just at the map in itself and the RD plot, you see that the density of hedgerows, so this is just the number of meters of hedgerows per acre, you see a gap at the border, which, I mean, it follows the consolidation. So in a sense, it's a bit the same graph that I showed you in the validity, just looking at it from another perspective. But the gap is pretty massive and really well observed. So the first thing. The second thing is the effect of water pollution.
Sorry, and here the data was TRT, or
sorry?
The origin of the data for the hedgerows, because it's so hard to measure.
This is the IGN BD topo yep. Of the hedgerow. So it's just they have all these little lines, and I just measured the number of lines in per municipality, and then divided the area of the number of meters of hedgerows by the area of the municipality, and that's what gives me this. Exactly. So that's kind of on that dimension. And the second one is on water pollution. So this is, looking at using a discontinuity design is very ill suited for water pollution, because there's water as a kind of a spreading on infiltration natural effect. But in a kind of in the first derivative idea, it's interesting. So there's the French water information system makes a list of municipalities which are labeled as vulnerable, and the idea, so the criteria that is used, so there's actually 3 criteria, but in the sample that we're looking at, these criteria is the most important or the most relevant, is basically the water that's been used, that will be used for human consumption, whether it contains a density of nitrate above 50 milligrams per liter. And you know, ideally this kind of threshold that we'd like not to cross, and you know, they seem to be strong evidence that agricultural, like modern agricultural large scale production has an effect on the nitrate level of groundwater. And so this is basically what I'm looking at. So I'm looking at the number of such municipalities that have been labeled as vulnerable around the threshold. And I think the effects are pretty striking. You know, this is far from an RDD in the sense that I'm really looking at a much wider cutoff. Also because just water is it seems to, you know, the area is so water moves underground. So the strict discontinuity doesn't make much sense. But you know, what we see is a pretty, you know, a level that almost, you know, every single municipality in the treated area is vulnerable. So, you know, we almost, we're very close to 1. Whereas as you move away, and typically from 30 kilometers, you start to move really much lower than this. As I said, this is correlational evidence. There might be confounding factors, but I think it's kind of it goes in the same direction than what I was trying to tell you earlier. Okay, so for the just to conclude quickly, so this is a study on the farmland consolidation effects on agricultural production, economic activity, the environment. I'm using as in the first place kind of this shift in a geological shift in soil composition to try to identify the effect of soil land consolidation. Run a set of validity tests which seem to support the approach, and I find, as you've seen, some pretty large effects on population, employment, per worker productivity, but also, you know, there's no free lunch. There's some adverse consequences on biodiversity, which I think are what should be noted. Yeah, so that's it for me. Thank you very much, and I'm very looking forward to comments.
Merci Gabriel. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres commentaires ou questions dans la salle? Other questions? You already had quite a few during the presentation.
I think Jean Sauveur, do you have a question?
You can hear me?
I can hear you mildly.
I was not sure, so I verify my configuration. So I thank you very much for this presentation. Can you detail a little bit more about the construction of the border?
Of the border?
You say so, it is soil, but I want more detail about which kind of data and how do you difference, what are the variables that allow to distinguish?
So basically what I did is that I took it's a GIS data set, so file produced by from the Sol, it's a Sol dominant in France, and I just drew the border in, you know, georeference the border of the massifs with, you know, a straight line for the Seuil du Poitou, and then you see on the map, you see go back to the, you see here, sorry, you see here there's a bit of, because then, so this is based on the municipality assignment, which follows the same rule as the one from that I did for the canton. It's a bit more noisy at the Seuil du Poitou, but basically that's, I'm really just following the massif line.
So you cross the polygons of the soil map with the municipality border.
It's exactly so. You know, I drew. So I georeferenced this massive, the border of the massif, and then the question is when you have a municipality that is, you know, at the border, some municipality are being crossed by the border, and then for these ones, I assign them relative to their relative importance on one side or the other. So if they have 70% on one side, I give them to that side. I also ran, you know, I was not really sure which approach was better, or I could exclude also these at the border, and it seems to have very, very minor effect on the results. So it's
yeah, okay, because I think that in according to the discussion, the remarks of Sylvain, I think an important challenge is to distinguish the direct effect of land quality. Okay, because you have a shift in land quality, you have a shift in land consolidation, and maybe I think that you have an heterogeneity along the border between. Sometimes it could be quite high discontinuity in terms of soil quality, and sometimes it is quite not so. And maybe looking at the heterogeneous effect along the border, maybe you can answer to the question to control the direct effect of land quality to the direct effect of land consolidation. Yeah. And on this point, this is the scale of the map that you show. It's 1 million. Is that?
So
the scale is 1 for 1 million.
So I'm not really sure. It's a zoom that. So I think that's the scale. So that's.
It's very strange for me also that, but soil scientists think about spatial resolution in terms of paper map. Okay, so from what I know, the left map is about 1 million scale, and you can find on GeoPortal some more finer scale, which is 250,000, so divided by 4, and the map look like very more heterogeneous along the border. So you can have some variation of you can separate strong soil shift to smooth soil shift along the border, and you can differentiate municipality with a strong soil shift and other with smooth.
Okay, but this is that's because I thought this resolution to when do the referencing was enough indeed, because when I draw the line, it relative to the side of the municipality, which is the area, it didn't seem to matter. But if I can get more heterogeneity, that's an interesting.
I think you can keep this line, but just to typically divide
to identify
in different groups, you know, and in the same order you have BRGM data, which is a pure geological data.
BRGM?
BRGM, it's a French mining, old mining institution, and it is also more precise. It is 50/100 scale.
Okay.
And here also, maybe you can found your border also in this data, but you can discriminate between smooth municipalities and.
Okay, perfect. Indeed, that would be interesting to just thank you very much. That's that's to the soil quality. And it also I wonder, because that's one of the tests that I was doing with the Seuil du Poitou, so this area here where you don't have such a sharp discontinuity in soil composition, so not such and there the effect seems to disappear, which maybe is a little bit, it's not exactly what you were suggesting because it's kind of going the other way around, but it's still interesting as a, if we have this idea of a linear shift towards kind of the evolution of structural transformation, moving kind of in a away from the Paris basin over time, then it's nice to see that on the side du Poitou, the effects disappear. But it doesn't really, yeah, it's
And you have some spatial RDD paper which explain how you can have an heterogeneous effect along the border, which is still. I can send you the reference.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. Any other question?
Did you try to compare this map on the right with the frontiers of Safer?
No. So what are Safer?
Safer are organisms in charge of impulsing land consolidation in particular. I'm not a specialist of these organisms. Maybe Jean-Sauveur or other people may have more information on these organisms. But I looked at the map. There are no 26 Safers. I see some frontiers on your map, so it may.
It might be confounding that.
Yes,
you mean that this administrative could overlap, and that could be so part of the effect could be an effect of the just different administration and different level, and not the That's
exactly.
yeah. No, so that I didn't run, but I will do so and see whether. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Are there other questions? Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions?
Hello, Gabriel. Sorry, I arrived late. So maybe I missed part of the story. I arrived at the middle, so all the introduction I missed it. But in your paper, in your working paper, I find in your website you spoke about mechanization, and when I arrived there, you already spoke about land consolidation. So I wonder if you discussed this choice at the beginning, or if it was a comment you received before. I'm just curious about why you don't use this term anymore.
No, so this is a thank you for your comment. That's a tough one when you're compared to your own working paper and you've made changes. Yeah, no. So the issue is that I started thinking about this as a mechanization, kind of using consolidation as a tool to measure effective mechanization. But yeah. After looking more at the literature and talking to people that have worked in these things, the main what I really have here is the treatment is consolidation, and then when looking down at the mechanisms, you might have different things, including mechanization. But this is I think the talking about consolidation, given the experiment I have, that's the more direct, the more natural, the real experiment that is there.
I agree, and maybe I missed it also. Did you have as an outcome mechanization? Like
so,
the number of tractor by
no, not so sorry, the
number of tractor or the number of capital manufacture
no, so this is something I'd like to have at the so this was the data I'm using. If you know a data set that includes this at the municipal level, I'd be very interested.
We had it. We did the test on this with the 55, 70, 88 nanonar data, and a little bit in a confirmation way. We did not find any strong effect of the consolidation on the number of tractors per hectare, or something like that, right, or per worker. So, but yeah, that's in the census, especially that's why we digitized the 55 census to have the baseline on that. But it's mostly zeros in the 55 census. Not a lot of people had tractors in 1955. But there is not a strong differential trend, especially when you look at, when you compare close enough people in time again, like we did. But maybe it would be different with your discontinuity.
Then I will look at it. So I looked at this from in the 1852. You do have some type of mechanization, which is like farm plow and threshing machines. So panel K and L. But that was the only. But if data on that is available, I'll for sure include this in to try to also talk a bit more on mechanisms and. Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, maybe we can stop there. Thank you, Gabriel, for this interesting presentation.
Thank you very much for the comments. This was really great. Thank you.
Good. And see you at another SEGO.
Ciao. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.